Hey guys, thank you for joining. I am happy to be back. I was away for a while, if you noticed, and that's mainly because my voice, here it goes again. My voice has been in and out because I've had the flu. So today's podcast might be a little short. Let's see where it takes us. Adulting. Adulting, when you hear the word adulting, it often makes you think about the word grown. Act like you're grown, man. Or do grown up things. Or get it right like a grown up. That type of vibe. Over the years, I've realized that, adulting is the process of being grown up. The things you do, the places you go, how you react, how you choose to make choices, how you choose to show up, all of that is influenced by adulting. And to the outside world, how you do this adulting shapes how you are perceived. And so adulting for some can be tricky because some of us did not get a manual. I don't know about other people, but some of us out here are really trying. We are trying to do our best without manuals, without any guidelines, sometimes with just the head and the heart. And so today we want to discuss how we move from surviving to thriving. How do we do that? Like, nobody teaches these things. So how do you move from surviving to thriving? So we're going to be talking about this, and feel free to comment, feel free to jump in on the conversation and just share your view. There is a comment section, so you can go ahead and do that. All right. So nobody wants to live a life where it's a hand-to-mouth situation where you're constantly trying to make ends meet. And so there are a few things that we need to bear in mind if we are going to move from a place of only surviving to thriving. Yeah. It begins with the mindset. For me, I think it starts with a mindset. Most things start with a mindset. You have to have the correct mindset. You have to stand from a place that, listen, everything that happens in your life is in your control. And those things that are outside of your control, you have to just give it to God. There is a little gem. I don't know if we can call it gem or a nursery rhyme or a quote. Yeah, I think it probably is a quote that says, Lord, no, it's a prayer. I think so, yeah. Lord, grant me the serenity, the peace, the calmness to accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things I can. Yes. And wisdom to know the difference. So I believe before we can even step into a place where thriving comes naturally, we have to get our minds right. We have to fix our mindset. And this prayer outlines exactly how to keep your mind in check. There are some things that you can control, and those things that you can control, you must do your best. Hear me, boy, we must do our very best to do our best. Yeah, we must try to do our very best with the things we can control. Now, for the things that we cannot control, like the weather, and whether there's an earthquake or a hurricane, or whether you get along with everybody at work or get along with everybody in your space, you can't control how people think or feel about you. But what you can do, you can control how you react and how you represent yourself. And so having the correct mindset is the first step to move from a place of I'm just surviving to I'm thriving. Yeah. And I hope that you agree. But even if you disagree, think about it. Think about it. We can't just say, oh, life is happening to me, and not take responsibility for what we can do about what's happening to us. Or life can be life might be lifing or can be lifing, but we have to, as adults, we have to move from a place of I need somebody to help me to navigate this. And only if somebody is there to navigate this with me, that's the only way it becomes a positive outcome. Can't have that mindset. Can't have that mindset to feel like if nobody helps us, then we can't do a thing or be a thing or change the way we walk or change the way we talk. We have everything within us. We have an innate ability given to us by God to improve ourselves, to make changes that we need to make. And so, I think I've talked about this mindset thing for a while here. So for me, I think to be able to move from a space of surviving to thriving, it starts in the mind. It starts in the mind. Yes, it does. It starts in the mind. All right. Now, what else can we say today? All right. I must be honest that from a personal standpoint, I think when I realized that I was an adult was when I was 19 years old. At that time, I was attending a community college. Yeah. I didn't go to sixth form. My grades weren't good enough for sixth form, according to the powers that be at my high school. And so I had the opportunity, and a rich one at that, to attend a community college. And I'm so grateful that I was able to attend a community college, because I learned so many things that I would not have learned if I was still attending my secondary high school. Because my secondary high school was actually female dominated. It was an all-girl school. And so when I went to community college, that's when I realized that I was an adult. At the age of 19, I was in my second year of community college. And I remember that I went to a friend's house, and her parents were there. And, I was saying good evening to them and such. And I stopped at the bedroom door for some strange reason. Not knowing why I stopped, but something in me stopped me at the door. And the response was, oh, you're so principled, you're so well-mannered. Yeah, you didn't enter the bedroom, and that's, a sign that you were trained well. Mind you, I've never been told don't enter a couple's bedroom unless they have invited you. I've never actually been taught that. But that's when I realized in that moment that there's so many things that I should know as an adult that I was never taught. Yeah, and so I started to be more cautious, or try to be more cautious in how I showed up in the world, because I realized, based on my upbringing, that there was a lot of things I didn't know. And I think a lot of us born in the 90s go through a time, or the realization that there are a lot of things that we need to do that we don't know how to do because we were never taught. And so we have to figure things out as we go, right in context. There are other situations like that, like when I just started to work at my present job, there are certain things I had to learn by observation. And when I realized that this was something I was supposed to know as an adult quote unquote, air quotes inserted. Yeah, I felt a little taken aback. Yeah, I did feel away. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I did feel badly that at my age at that point, in that situation, when those situations did arise, I was not equipped because I've never been in the situation and nobody ever taught me like, hey, this is how you do that, or this is yeah. So, yeah, it was hard to navigate, but the truth of the situation is that adulting is often like that. It's a learn as you go process, and you have to realize that it's a learn as you go process, and not shame yourself into thinking that you had to know everything. Like, you did not come with a downloadable program. No, you're a human being. So your experiences shape what you know. And if you've never been in an experience, how can you know? So I think we as adults, or persons who are becoming adults, you need to step away from the shaming. If you find yourself in a situation where you ought to know but you don't know, first things first, step away from the shaming and ground yourself in that moment. Accept that you don't know and make a choice to get the knowledge that you need. Ask the questions that you need to ask if it's a safe space to ask certain questions. If it's not a safe space, do some research. Educate yourself on your own time and in your own accord. But please step away from the shaming. It's okay not to know. But when you realize that you don't know, do something about it. All right? Okay. Yeah. So, one of the other things that I realize about adulting is that I don't know if it's the time that I was born in, but nobody really educates you about emotional health. Yeah, emotional well-being. And your emotions and how you handle your emotions are a big part of adulting, are a big part of being grown up. Yeah, so every time I mention adulting, being grown up is what I mean. And I did say earlier that we have to be careful because often adulting is a concept that is forced upon us in terms of expectation. You're supposed to act like this. You're supposed to know this. You're supposed to do that. And we have to realize that adulting is something that is built on expectation, because the world says if you are over 18, you ought to know this. If you're over 18, you ought to know that. Pretty much, if you're over 20, you ought to know this. If you're over 20, you ought to do that. Or even further, if you're over 30, you ought to know this. If you're over 30, you ought to do that. Feel me? And so it is built on expectation and perception. So we have to be careful. And nobody warns us about that emotional weight that comes with adulting, especially adulting that is built on expectation and perception. And so for me, adulting, or being an adult that is not just surviving but thriving, you have to invest in knowing how to manage your emotions. Personally, I might be biased, but I think females have a harder time learning how to manage emotions because of the ups and downs of our existence with, our cycles and everything, and hormones being spiked at different phases of the month and stuff like that. So it's more difficult from my perspective for a woman. But maybe from a male perspective, men are saying, well, that's not true. That's just a perception that's forced on us by our world culture, to think that it's harder for women to manage their emotions than men. And so managing how you feel is an important part of adulting, or healthy adulting. And healthy adulting is termed here in this space as thriving, not just surviving. All right. So an emotion comes up. Sometimes you might not know how to name this emotion, but you feel an emotion in your chest. And you're like, oh my God. Sometimes this emotion probably makes you anxious, or the emotion makes you fearful because you can't describe it, or you don't have capacity to experience it based on your own origins, your background, your upbringing, right? But what you need to learn to do, whatever emotion it may be, you have to find what works for you. And the word self-soothe comes to mind, right? So say you're feeling anxious, you have to find your own way to soothe that anxious feeling, not ignore it or shame yourself for feeling anxious, but find a way to soothe your anxious feelings, and make a plan to move forward. Because there's a reason why you're feeling anxious. You have to acknowledge that you're anxious and not shame yourself for feeling anxious. And then you have to ask yourself, why am I feeling anxious? And then when you get to the root of why you're feeling anxious, then you can ground yourself in that moment and say, all right, what can I do to help myself to alleviate this feeling of anxiousness? And I think that's the process of self-soothing. You have to figure out what works for you. And the anxiousness, the anxiety is the better word, or the English word, or the correct English word for this context. Anxiety is just another emotion. So for you, it might not be anxiety, it might be anger, it might be fear, it might be frustration, it might be rejection, it might be so many other things. But you have to, as an adult now, who is determined not to just allow life to happen to him or her, when these emotions come up that you don't know how to handle or manage well, step one, accept that you're feeling this way. Step two, do not shame yourself for feeling this way. Step three, ask yourself why you're feeling this way. Probe through your heart and mind and ask why you're feeling this way. And after you figure that out, you have to choose a coping strategy, something that works for you to get you through those emotions. And I don't mean like suppress them, because suppressing them not going to help, my dear. Suppressing them not going to help. Suppressing them delays the outcome, or the reaction, or let's say the combustion. Because if you keep pressing down something, the pressure will build up and there will be an explosion. So to push down an emotion is not the best approach. All right, we're coming down nicely. Last, well, maybe not the last, but this is worth mentioning. Setting boundaries. To be honest, it's just in the last, what year are we in? We're in 2026. I think the first time I acknowledged boundaries is 2020, when it was COVID. When it was COVID, and we were all locked away. So a lot of us had to do more emotional work, or maybe because of the routine of being locked in due to the pandemic. We became more aware of certain things that we didn't like, things that bothered us, things. And so I think that was the first time I experienced the word boundary. Now, it is my opinion and maybe unpopular, but let's work through that. Setting correct boundaries, I think, is one of the most needed and necessary skill that you can have as an adult. And this looks like saying no without no guilt. Recognizing that you've outgrown relationships and situations that no longer serve you, and choosing peace over everything else, over familiarity, over loyalty. Sometimes you have to choose peace. Yeah, I'm not saying that you should abandon your Christian principles and abandon loving. Okay, hear me well. I'm not saying you should abandon loving people, but you have to set correct boundaries in different situations to protect your mind, soul, body, and spirit. And that's something you have to do as an adult. All right? So, another part of adulting is learning or choosing to have hard conversations, right? Sometimes, if a conversation is needed to quash certain things or to quell certain situations, you just have to put your big shorts on or big panties on, grown up stuff, and have those conversations. It might leave a sting, but it is better to have hard conversations than have these things as blocks weighing down on your mind or your heart, right? And also, we have to come into a space of honesty and come into a knowledge that if you're going to be an adult that is thriving and not surviving, you have to reflect before you react. And trust me, this one is something I'm still learning, because sometimes I react more than I reflect, or I do a reversal. So I react and then I reflect. But no, if we're going to thrive as adults, we need to reflect before we react, because everything that we do has a consequence. So you might do something and it has a positive consequence. You do something and it has a negative consequence. So before you do certain things or say certain things, please let us as thriving adults reflect before we react. Okay, yeah, that was a mouthful. I definitely believe that there's more to this conversation. Adulting 101, you've been discussing surviving versus thriving. And one of the things that we want to walk away from this conversation, understanding, is that maybe adulthood isn't about having it all together. Maybe adulthood, adulting, being grown, acting grown, is about being honest enough to build a better you, to make better choices, to put yourself in better situations than the ones that you're in today. All right, folks. See you next time. All right, cool. Thanks for tuning in today to Just Chattingz. If you liked it here, share it, leave a comment, and help the podcast grow. Until next time, keep living, keep laughing, keep growing with God in the mix, because He sees you and you're never alone. Walk good. And if for whatever reason you cannot be good, be careful.